Welcome and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode until the question and answer section of today's conference. At that time, you may press star 1 if you would like to ask a question. I would also like to inform all parties this call is being recorded. If you have any objections, please disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn the call over to Jared Liu. Thank you. You may begin.
Great. Thank you very much, and thanks everyone for joining us. This is the Thursday webcast series. It's a monthly webcast held at the lunch hour. The trainings leverage local successes by amplifying to a larger audience to model organizations, methods, materials, and approaches. Sessions are planned to last no more than 1 hour, with 2 presenters speaking on the same topic from slightly different perspectives, each for 10 to 15 minutes, followed by 10 to 15 minutes of questions and answers. Today's session is approved by the ISA for 1 CEU hour and by SAF for 1 CFE Category 1. If you haven't already given me your certification number, you can email me after this session. Also, most state landscape architecture boards require only a certificate of completion, which ACT is happy to provide to participants who request this. This is a program of the Alliance for Community Trees, and we encourage you to consider joining if you're not a member. We want to thank the sponsors for today's call, the Home Depot Foundation and the USDA Forest Service. Today's session is Canopy Campaigns and Public Tree Goals, Part 1, Goal Setting. Many cities and counties around the country are taking up the banner of a tree campaign or public canopy initiative. The central challenge to such programs is how to balance the public relations goals of the campaigns with implementing a visionary yet achievable initiative. Today's first speaker is Cheryl Collin. She is a consultant for American Forest in Washington, D.C. Cheryl is a consultant for the Urban Ecosystem Center at American Forest after serving for 16 years with the nonprofit organization. She is a landscape architect with 25 years of experience in the field of urban forestry in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. Ms. Collin provides applied research to environmental and economic benefits of urban ecosystems to foster change in urban planning and public policy. She is a contributing author to the American Planning Association's PAS report, Planning the Urban Forest, Ecology, Economy, and Community Development. Ms. Collin recently received her MBA in Sustainable Business at the Bainbridge Graduate Institute and also consults in the local food movement. She holds a master's in landscape architecture from the University of California and a bachelor's of science from the University of Michigan. And we are pleased to welcome Cheryl back to the webcast series.
Thanks very much, Jared. It's great to be back, and welcome everyone. Today we really want to talk about tree canopy goals, and I'm excited to share the stage with Dan and Kevin today. We worked on a project looking at urban ecosystem analysis of the city of Bellevue, and particularly with a focus on trying to set tree canopy goals and looking at it from a land use perspective. So I'm really excited that we have the chance to talk about that today, because I think that Bellevue is really on the cutting edge of looking at this from a very progressive point of view. And I'm excited to hear Dan and Kevin share how they're planning to implement the work that we did with this urban ecosystem analysis, and particularly focused on canopy goal setting. So I thought it would be helpful to start off with a slide and just a brief history, giving you all a perspective on how American Forest came to the idea of setting tree canopy goals in the first place. And looking way back to the 1980s, American Forest did 3 early surveys of people working in urban forestry. We did a study in 86, 89, and 1991 focused on the health and condition of public street trees. And what's so interesting, even though this might seem like ancient history to some people, but believe it or not, we didn't really know, have the technology and the tools that we have today to really be able to understand what the urban forest provides for us. So at that time, we had limited technology, and people were going around and inventorying individual street trees. So our first State of the City Forest that was published in 1986 reported that urban forests in cities that we surveyed were in decline, that the average city was losing 4 street trees for every 1 planted. And what was interesting about the surveys at that time and the information is that we were raising people's attention to the alarming rate of decline in our nation's public trees, but we weren't really able to quantify the extent of the city's tree population at that time. And even more so, we were unable to quantify what the community's entire urban forest population was. We estimated that about 10% of an urban forest was composed of street trees, but we were missing most of that story. So we were very fortunate to see the development of geographic information systems, because now we know so much more about the extent and the composition of the urban forest, and then thanks to research done by the U.S. Forest Service and the Natural Resource Conservation Service and other research organizations and agencies, we now know a lot more about the ecology and the economic benefits of the urban forest. So with the advent of geographic information systems, we're able today to take satellite imagery or aerial imagery that has special spectral bands associated with it, and with GIS specialists who can analyze this imagery, they can actually translate and classify the spectral images into land cover classes. So I'm just have a slide here of the city of Bellevue, which we'll talk more about in a moment, showing you that we're able now to let you know that the city of Bellevue in 2007 was composed of 37% tree canopy cover and these other land covers as well. And I want to just mention to you that this imagery was initially classified by Sanborn, and they had excellent imagery to work with. It was satellite imagery collected at 1/2 foot scale, so that there's a lot of detail and richness to this imagery. So along with knowing what the composition of the urban forest is, the work that American Forest has done and the City Green software that we developed can now quantify the ecological and economic benefits of land cover, including tree canopy cover. And so our analysis reports typically will look at what the air pollution removal and the stormwater runoff and water quality and carbon benefits are. And we spoke about that one of our last webinars, so I won't go into those details. But I did want to return to this topic of why communities should even think about setting tree canopy goals. And over the years, as American Forest has been using the urban ecosystem analysis to look at different communities, urban forests, we've been able to run at least, or I should say more than 30 different urban ecosystem analyses in communities all over the country. And from that, we've been seeing a general trend that we know that tree canopy has declined by about 30%, and that urban areas have increased by around 20% over the last 3 decades or so. And what's interesting about that is that if communities don't have a big picture of what their urban forest is composed of or what the benefits are, then as communities continue to develop, that we're seeing a loss of tree canopy almost project by project. And while one individual project doesn't make a huge impact, you can imagine that communities do lose tree canopy over time cumulatively. So that's why we think it's really important to set overall tree canopy goals, get the big picture, and set some goals to say, what is our canopy today, what should it be, and what are the benefits that we're deriving by enhancing our tree canopy. So we know that canopy is related to environmental quality, and that we know a lot more about the function of trees in our urban forests today, and that by slowing down stormwater runoff and improving air and water quality, that cities can reduce the expense of building infrastructure to manage their air and water resources. And so American Forest's intent then is to really help communities, both to help them first quantify what their urban forests and their land cover is composed of, and to calculate the value of that so that decision makers can really begin integrating what we call the green infrastructure, tree canopy, and other related natural resources into their urban infrastructure. A lot of communities, as we started doing this work, were saying, well, what should our tree canopy goal be? And while there is no one answer, American Forest thought it would be helpful, based on the work that we've done previously, to look at tree canopy in different communities around the country, to just start some beginning points or some frame of reference for some canopy goals. And you can see I've listed these here. So we divided up just very generally, looking at metropolitan areas east of the Mississippi and then in the Pacific Northwest. An average tree canopy goal, say, might be 40%. And then you can see as we look into different land uses that the tree canopy would change. It makes sense that urban residential areas of a community would have more space to grow trees and larger trees, that the central business district would have less potential to do so. And so we took that into account. And then you can see also when you start looking at different geographic areas, like in the southwest and the dry west, that we reduced those canopy goals. Now, I have to emphasize that these canopy goals are general guidelines. It's just vital that each community must measure their current tree canopy cover and then really develop tree canopy targets based on their unique mix of their climate, their geography, their land cover, land patterns, and other factors like that. And that's why I think this Bellevue example is going to be so interesting to look at, because they didn't just take American Forest's general guidelines. They really wanted to dig into looking at specific guidelines. So the Bellevue project that we're going to talk about today is actually a second study that we've done for the city. American Forest did an initial urban ecosystem analysis in 1999, and we came back and then did an update in 2008. And what's interesting is to start looking at the trends in change of tree canopy over time and seeing what the city could do, what actions they could take to change the decline in tree canopy cover that they were seeing. So our analysis for the city of Bellevue, and I just want to orient you, for those of you who aren't familiar where the city is east of the city of Seattle and across from Lake Washington. So this green area is the city of Bellevue. So looking historically at how land cover has changed over time, the first analysis that we looked at using Landsat data looked at tree canopy decline between 1986 and 1996, and we noted a 12% tree canopy decline during that time, and that's marked in these red areas here, as you can see. And then when we did our more recent analysis, we noticed that the city was continuing to lose tree canopy cover, and we calculated a 9% loss during a 1996 to 2006 time period. So the city is continuing to lose tree canopy cover, and then the issue is what can they do about that? What policy changes and program changes can they make? So we dug into looking not just overall and setting overall tree canopy goals, but it was very important for the city to look at different land uses and noting the different proportions of private property, city-owned property, and public right-of-way that the city has, recognizing that there's a unique opportunity and responsibility for the entire community to get involved. And so it was very important for the city to start to dig into these different land uses, understand more specifically what the tree canopy was in each of these existing ownership categories, and then what the benefits would be of enhancing tree canopy cover and starting to set some goals. So that's exactly what we did. In addition to looking at the city as a whole and what the 2006 data showed us overall, we also focused on specific land uses. So this is just one example showing you the commercial and mixed use. We have a map that displays that land use in, it's highlighted here so you can see it. And we did a map for each one of the land uses. And then just to show you a review of air pollution removal, stormwater value, and carbon. So these are the kinds of ecological values that are saving for the tree canopy as it is in this point in time. And so that gives you a sense that even though it's commercial and mixed use, that there's actually quite a bit of ecological and economic savings in this land use category. So we looked at all the different land use categories, and we looked at what the current tree canopy percentage was for each one, and then American Forest, in conjunction with the City of Bellevue, looked at what we wanted to recommend for increase, and you can see the differences here in percentages. And what does that mean? So I want to also just mention that we didn't do any kind of specific calculation to come up with these. It was really more about what is there, what's feasible, given each one of these different land uses. And it was definitely a partnership working back and forth with the city to come up with these recommendations. So as we did some modeling using the City Green software, we were able to say, okay, in the public right-of-way, which as you can see is a huge area that winds its way all through the city in each one of these areas, that if we increase tree canopy cover by 5%, these are the additional benefits that would be provided. And so we provided that information to the city. And I also wanted to point out another interesting aspect, that it's not just about increasing tree canopy cover, but taking the Central Business District, for example, where it's difficult to increase tree canopy cover because of so much impervious surface, that with the existing 15.5 acres of trees that have an impervious understory, that if that understory were changed to a pervious surface, that there would be additional benefits derived in terms of 269 cubic feet of stormwater saved, and then we derived an economic benefit from that. So there's definitely a lot of different ways, different strategies to increase the benefits derived, and that's what's so interesting about looking at it from a particular land use perspective. So we gave all this information to the City of Bellevue, and now I get to turn it over to Dan and Kevin, who are going to talk about how they took this information and then implemented it into their program.
Okay, and so let's take a couple minutes just to check with participants if there are any questions as well. Rose, can you open up the lines, please?
Yes, sir. If you would like to ask a question, please press *1 on your phone. Please unmute your phone and record your name clearly when you are prompted. Your name is required to introduce your question. Once again, to ask a question, it is *1 on your phone. One moment for the first couple questions to come through.
Great. And if anyone's feeling shy or just keyboard inclined, you can type your question into the Q&A manager up at the top of the screen in one of the menu bars, and I can come on the line and read the question for you. One of the questions I have for you, Cheryl, and great job, thank you very much for being here. We hear about all these cities that have million tree campaigns, or mayors who are announcing these big initiatives where the city will lose, or the collective population of the city will lose so many tons of waste, and there just seems to be so much on the marketing side of this that they're choosing these big numbers regardless of how they're implementing it. How do you balance that? Obviously the process is very much driven in what the city's trying to achieve on the economic and community development levels. But how do you balance their desire for this big and splashy marketing initiative?
Well, I think that is great for getting public attention and raising awareness of trying to do something good to improve the community benefit. But I think the kind of analysis that I've been talking about today really quantifies what those benefits are. And I think that any city who wants to put some real data behind their campaigns would do well to first understand what their tree canopy is and what the benefits are of improving that. So in addition to just saying we're going to plant 1 million trees, we're going to actually improve the environmental quality of our community by saving so much stormwater management, and then that translates into, say, different kinds of infrastructure that the city doesn't have to build and pay for as a result of that. So I think they go really hand in hand. One certainly is a wonderful public campaign to raise awareness, but the other is really digging down then into the specifics of, how do you implement that campaign? What does that mean? And what is that really going to do for our community?
Okay, we'll go online. Does your data have info on large versus small trees and shade coverage? Is there a big difference in cost benefit? Is there not a difference between oaks and crepe myrtles, for example?
The urban ecosystem analysis that we do doesn't look at specific species. It really looks at tree canopy cover overall. So crepe myrtle being a small tree is not going to have a large canopy as a larger tree. And so the satellite imagery that's taken and then the subsequent classification is going to look at overall tree canopy cover. So obviously the more and larger trees that you can plant in areas that are appropriate for larger trees, you're going to have a larger tree canopy cover and derive more benefits.
Is there any intersection between the free iTree software and the City Green software? Are they compatible? Are there ways to get the two technologies to work together?
Not that I know of. We're GIS-based, and we look at the entire tree canopy cover. And iTree is made up of different modules, and they've been, I would say the one area of overlap is that the research that has gone into the formulas for each one of them have been all derived by the U.S. Forest Service in terms of the air quality and carbon work. So all of those formulas are packaged in both programs, and then we use the Natural Resource Conservation Services TR55 modeling for stormwater runoff.
Okay. Where can I find the equations you use to determine the value of urban tree acreage? Have you done any analysis on the heat island effect?
I think those are two questions. So the first one, if I understand the question correctly, the amount of acreage is measured by looking at the satellite imagery and classifying that information then into different land cover types. So it's all GIS-based information, which is ArcMap and ArcGIS based. And the second question had to do with heat islands. Early on, we had done some work with looking at shading and reducing the tree canopy and reducing temperatures. We took that out of City Green because we went to, when the technology increased to looking at high-resolution imagery and looking at larger areas, then we went to kind of a different technology so that in order to do particular shading, you have to look at actually going on the ground and doing some ground truthing of individual properties. And so we moved away from that to be able to look at larger areas and cities as a whole. Now that said, what's interesting about as the technology increases is that the data and the imagery is getting so much better. So, for instance, with the city of Bellevue, this imagery is amazing because it was all taken at 1/2 foot resolution, and that gives you so much detail, which is really incredible. So,
Okay. Are there any questions?
I think I answered those questions.
Does the operator have any questions in queue?
I do not have any questions over the phone.
Okay, I'll keep going online. Do you see any use for this software in terms of the Copenhagen climate change talks?
Well, that's an interesting question. We are at American Forest and talking more about global climate change and how we might enhance that in terms of City Green and just the work that we're doing overall. So we know that City Green currently looks at carbon storage and carbon sequestration because trees are a carbon sink. And so we already have that component programmed in. What is missing is an economic value. And as all of this gets sorted out, and if there is actually a requirement for carbon exchange and cap and trade, if that ever gets implemented, then we can put an economic value on that carbon and incorporate that into City Green.
For someone who wants to use your services or go through this process, can you provide some sense for what the costs are or how the costs are determined for using City Green?
A lot of it has to do with the size of the community and the complexity of the kind of analysis that you're interested in. The best thing would be to call the office, and we can get you talk to you about what your needs are, and then give you a preliminary proposal. A lot of communities ask for a preliminary proposal and then go and raise funds for that. Oftentimes it's cost share of public and private funds or federal funds and local funds.
Okay. Have any cities used the value of their urban forest assets to increase their net worth? If so, can they use it to raise bond funds such as under GASB 34?
We looked at that, and I know that one nonprofit group is really trying to make that happen. I don't know of any examples of communities that have done that so far. We think it's a great idea. There's some papers from previous American Forest national conferences that discuss that idea, but I don't know that it's actually happened, that any one community has actually used that for the GASB 34 yet.
And I'll jump on that too and say that there were a lot of discussions about capitalization of trees with that GASB rule at the annual meeting in Portland this past November. So there definitely are some of the presentations from those sessions. Mike Rosen with the City of Portland was really spearheading a talk on that along with Scott Fogarty at Friends of Trees. I'm sure their presentation's available at the conference proceedings online. And top of my head, I can't remember who the other one I heard about was, but I'll research that and we'll provide a resource list afterwards.
That's great to hear that work's gaining momentum.
Yeah. How do you translate a desired percent canopy increase to a number of new trees needed?
We have had, we didn't do that with Bellevue, but we've had other communities ask us to do that. And there's just a simple formula that we plugged into a Excel spreadsheet, and it's based on what your community's average urban tree is. You give it a diameter, and then you just kind of plug in a formula. And I'd be happy to make that formula available to Jared if you want to post that. And it's not currently up on our American Forest website, but we plan to put that up when we update our website. So, Jared, is that something you could make available on your website along with this presentation?
That sounds great. Yeah, please provide that.
Okay.
Besides newly developed areas, or because newly developed areas will have newly planted and therefore smaller canopies, is this taken into account when considering the calculations for canopy coverage in these areas?
Well, again, the analyses are done based on what the satellite imagery tells us and what the bands of data are translated into for tree canopy cover. So we don't make estimates of that. We just basically say this is what's here right now. But what's interesting, though, is that we're encouraging communities to update their analyses every 5 years or so, because we recognize that communities are oftentimes have aggressive tree planting campaigns, and they want to see the difference in that. And we saw that when we worked with the city of San Antonio, Texas, where we did an earlier analysis, and we came back several years later, and we know that they're starting to see some of that show up in the imagery. And of course, the better resolution that you have with your imagery, the more it's going to pick up that kind of data.
Cheryl, when I'm looking at the map that's on the screen right now, the darkest category, the brownish one, that says buildings and you say buildings and structures?
Yes.
Okay. It's just apparently it's small and it's difficult to read.
Yeah, and I guess I could just comment on the legend there, where you can see the different colors. This particular analysis, it was able to, because of the fine resolution of this data at a half-foot resolution, Sanborn was able to classify this data and actually pick out the difference between deciduous trees and evergreen trees, shrubs, and so on. And I would also say that in conjunction with this land cover analysis, that Sanborn did an impervious surface analysis with a separate set of data, and that's how we were able to get such detailed information on things like paved surfaces and buildings and structures. This is not what American Forest would typically do with an analysis. This was a much more extensive analysis that's used across multiple departments within the city of Bellevue. So it goes beyond just this particular urban ecosystem analysis.
At the Chicago Climate Exchange, the price of carbon is very small. What do you think the true price of carbon is?
That's a great question. If I could answer that, man, I'd be a millionaire. There's lots of different exchanges around the globe, and if you look at the ones in Europe and other parts of the country, other parts of the world, they're much greater, and so they value carbon much more than at the Chicago Climate the Stock Exchange. So I think it's still in flux, and I don't know that we have that answer yet.
All right. Where can I find the equations you use to determine the value of urban tree acreage? By value, I mean cubic feet, et cetera, and its monetary value.
The formulas that we use in City Green software are up on our website. So if you go into the American Forest website, which we'll have at the end of the slide, and Jared will have, I imagine, up on your website, you can go into urban ecosystem analysis, and for each one of the different kinds of analyses, it has a little link that says to learn more about the formulas in City Green, click here, and you can do that for each one of the analyses.
Is the square foot coverage changing at a different rate than the number of trees? Not sure. I'm trying to read the detail of that. They say, I see a lot of big trees being replaced by small trees, on a one-for-one basis by homeowners. Is the square feet coverage changing at a different rate than the number of trees? Certainly this would indicate a different type of canopy program than one where there's just a lack of replanting.
I think that is a question that needs to be asked at the local level. Dan might have some opinion on that, of what's happening in Bellevue, because that gets back to planning and policies on an individual community level. So I don't think I know the answer to that.
Okay. I wasn't sure if I got that one quite right anyway. I guess that's probably a good transition unless the operator has any other questions in queue.
I have no questions at this time.
Okay, perfect. Well, that's a perfect segue for us to introduce, and thank you very much, Cheryl.
You're quite welcome.
For us to introduce Dan DeWald and his colleagues. Dan DeWald is the Natural Resource Division Manager with the Parks Department at the City of Bellevue. Kevin LeClaire is the Senior Land Use Planner with Development Services Department in the City of Bellevue. and Alyssa Ostergaard is the Senior Engineering Technician in the Utilities Department at the City of Bellevue. The City of Bellevue is well beyond the first important step of measuring the extent and value of their urban forest. They're using this information to examine development and zoning requirements, test design scenarios, and measure the potential impact on trees, open space, the environment, and ultimately their community's livability. And we're thrilled to have the City of Bellevue on the line.
Thank you, Jared. I left Cheryl's slide up here to give people a little more orientation to the City of Bellevue. We are 10 minutes basically east of Seattle, and I've got the pointer up showing you where Lake Washington is, and this is Mercer Island. And we lie between two bodies of water, Lake Washington on the west and Lake Sammamish over here on the east. Bellevue's the fifth largest city in the state of Washington. We're a relatively young city. We were incorporated in 1953. Our population grew rapidly after the floating bridges were put across Lake Washington, allowing Seattle and Bellevue to merge, and we've grown at the rate of about 20,000 people per decade. And our present population is about 120,000 people. As Cheryl was discussing, the urban ecological analysis, or the tree canopy study, is a component of a larger initiative within the city, the Environmental Stewardship Initiative. And that initiative has four component pieces under what we call the Green Infrastructure Master Plan. As you can see on the screen, there's a comprehensive tree plan, natural drainage practices, green buildings, and climate and energy. We're funded for this. We haven't hired a consultant to put the Green Infrastructure Master Plan project together yet, but we do have a lot of pieces in place. And from a tree standpoint, this Green Infrastructure Master Plan will review the city's existing tree policies and programs. It'll identify gaps and formulate a long-term plan and a unified plan between departments where we can work to set desired tree canopy goals and maximize our ecological benefits from that canopy. If people are interested in looking at the study that American Forest did for the City of Bellevue, I put the website up here. I'm sure it's on American Forest website too. I'll leave it up for a few seconds, but it's www.bellevuelaw.gov/environmental, and it's in a PDF format, and you can download that. We basically looked at the city from a three-pronged approach. Working together with the American Forest, City of Bellevue staff decided to analyze the city's canopy by both zoning classification to see how we matched up with American Forest's recommended goals, and also by ownership. And in ownership, we looked at it from both the city parks and open space property, private property, and public right-of-way, and that's what we've called this three-pronged approach. We did this for a couple reasons. We wanted to know the canopy cover within the different zoning categories when you backed out the park trees and the right-of-way trees. The Parks Department canopy coverage is at 69% on our acreage, and we wanted to see what those other land uses were if you took park properties out of there. We also wanted to know the canopy cover of our park system and of our right-of-way. And with the information from the study, we felt that we could immediately implement program changes on park property and on right-of-way property, but that wouldn't be an easy case on private property. That would have to go through a longer process. The slide that I have up right now shows the recommendations from the canopy study that American Forest did, and this is found on page 15 if you open up that study. In looking at the public property, the first leg of the three-legged chair, Bellevue's park system is an interconnected system of open spaces and developed parks. We have approximately 2,600 acres with approximately 1,900 acres of forested natural area and open space land. The developed parks and the community centers within the park system are managed by the Resource Management Division, and the Natural Resource Division manages all the natural areas, the street trees, environmental education centers, and the trail system. The natural areas we manage through what we call our forest management program, which has a major focus on moving, I show you the slide in the top here, this basically pioneering stand of alder and maple, which is predominant through the city. We're moving the forest to a more mixed, highly diverse forest, and which consists of significantly more evergreen species. With the information from the study that American Forest did, we submitted for, in the budget process in 2009-10, we submitted using the American Forest Canopy study as a tool and received an additional $50,000 annually in our operational budget. The initial ad that we went in for, we asked for $500,000, but it got whittled down a little bit. The next thing that we wanted to know, and the next phase in the study for us, is we know the canopy cover on the park system. We want to know what the condition of those trees are. We have 1,900 acres of forested natural area, so we're working with Earth Corps and Seattle Urban Nature staff to do a condition assessment of that acreage. We're going to do stratify random sample, 100, 1/10 acre plots. We've developed 4 classifications, and you can see on the screen, from Class 1 being healthy and sustainable, Class 2, mixed forest, still doing pretty good, but there's presence of invasives. Class 3, struggling a little bit with invasives. In Class 4 is where regeneration hasn't taken place to that next successional stage, and yet have the dying deciduous, primarily alders, or a non-forested condition of invasives. Why are we doing this? Well, this slide, what I want to show in the slide is the purpose of this project is to show the acreage of forested property that needs intervention. That would be the condition Class 3 or condition Class 4 properties, and how forest restoration enhancement activities will increase the ecosystem value, and therefore it's a good investment. We'll be using the data that we gather from the next phase, the condition assessment, in the upcoming 2011 and 12 budget process. Here's some examples of projects from the Environmental Stewardship Initiative money on our forest management program. You can see this site here. It's a forested hillside. This isn't actually forested. This is blackberries. We removed the blackberries, and you can see the planting effort on the slide below. Same situation over on the right. The blackberries have primarily been removed. There's a lot of scrub willow in there that was thinned out, and then the slide on the bottom shows restoration activity. Moving along, Kevin LeClaire is going to jump in and talk about private land.
Thanks, Dan. So, as Dan mentioned, the 3-pronged approach, one major component of our urban forest being on public property, but as you saw from an earlier slide, 69% of the city of Bellevue is actually in private ownership. And so one major concern for us is how we're going to maintain and hopefully someday expand our urban forest canopy on the private land. And as most municipalities know, there's a few ways you can do this. And very often we go right into thinking, well, what's a regulatory approach that we can just prevent people from cutting trees down? And that is obviously one tool that jurisdictions have, but it's not a very popular tool most often. And our city leaders feel strongly, and most of the staff do as well, that we can gain probably more ground because we know that people have an innate care for trees and a love for trees just by being around here, so that if we can do more to get good information into their hands and into their heads about the benefits of trees, then they can take upon this stewardship role and sort of make it something that they live with. So there's a few things that we've been doing in the city of Bellevue to try and further the goals of the urban ecosystem analysis and the environmental stewardship initiatives. And first and foremost, an outgrowth of this Canopy study was what we call neighborhood character phases 1 and 2. And what that did is actually it affirmed essentially our tree preservation rules in our land use code for subdivisions, short plats and long plats, where we increased our, right now we use diameter inches as a proxy for the canopy coverage. So originally our canopy, or our tree percentage preservation on a subdivision was 15% of the diameter inches, and the City Council, because of the information provided by the study, increased that percentage to now 30% of the trees to be preserved on a subdividing lot. So if someone were subdividing, they'd have to preserve twice the amount of trees that they normally would have in the previous codes. We've also been trying to get more information about the benefits of critical areas in the city and the functions and values that they provide. And so we developed a outreach training on critical areas, which in the city of Bellevue, that means stream corridors, wetlands, steep slopes, and our shorelines. And we've been offering training programs to environmental consultants, architects, engineers, and property owners about the benefits of critical areas and the functions that they provide their landscape. We have also developed a set of tree pruning guidelines that is now available to the public on the city's website. And what this talks about is really what are the industry accepted practices for managing trees, so that people have a free resource to understand that they might have an option for pruning and maintaining their tree when they're thinking that maybe that tree has outlived its useful life, that they can potentially prune it and keep it in the landscape so that it can continue to grow and provide benefits. Another thing that we've been working on is actually updating our tree protection standards. So on a piece of property that is undergoing some redevelopment or new development, our typical or older standard was to just protect the root zone at the drip line of the tree. We reviewed some of the new science out there about the root spread underneath trees and realized that we needed to actually scale that root protection zone to the size of the tree so that we can have a more adequate protection of that root zone, because that is really the foundation of the health and long-term life of these trees. And then finally, something we're working on right now is actually using the canopy percentage data to work with specific neighborhoods so that they can understand what their canopy percentage is, so they can understand what the value of that canopy is, and then working with the neighborhood themselves and our planning commission to develop neighborhood-specific tree preservation goals that may end up in our land use code so that they can move forward with specific protections on single-family lots.
Thanks, Kevin. Moving on to the third leg of the three-pronged approach is public right-of-way. A public right-of-way in the city of Bellevue is managed and maintained by three different entities. There's the Natural Resource Division in Parks manages the formal street tree program, where we have about 10,000 street trees and 140 acres. And then the Bellevue Utilities Street Maintenance Division manages just kind of natural vegetation that grows adjacent to the road, but a significant majority of the trees and vegetation in the right-of-way is managed and maintained by the adjacent property owner. We think there's a lot of opportunity within the right-of-way. Recommendations from the tree canopy study included providing more pervious paving as a canopy understory and increasing tree planting in the right-of-way. One finding that I found really interesting from the American Forest study was the amount of impervious surface at 46%. When I think back, at the turn of the century, or 1860s, 1870s, basically Bellevue was old growth forest, and about 30 or 40 years, we pretty much logged that old growth forest from the shores of Lake Washington and Sammamish all the way to the Cascades. One of the significant efforts to date within this third leg is our natural drainage practices. Our stormwater utility, which is I think the city of Bellevue is really a pioneer from a national standpoint relative to natural drainage practices, with us having one of the first stormwater utilities created in the 1970s and 80s. And we had an open streams policy where stormwater runoff and stuff was directed to riparian corridors and streams within the city. And most of those streams and riparian corridors are preserved and are part of the park and open space system. The storm drainage update will take place January 1st, 2010. So if you do go to the website that's listed on the page here on the slide, you won't find the updated code until 2010 on our natural drainage practices, low impact development techniques. Also, we've been working with the distributor of Silvacell, Deeproot, and there's an email from Deeproot on the right where they let us know that the Washington Department of Ecology has identified the Silvacell system as functionally equivalent to a rain garden. And with the update to the storm drainage practices that happens January 1st, we will receive detention credit for the use of this type of low impact development technique. Again, if you haven't had a chance, here's the natural drainage practices website. If you want me to go back to that a little bit later to write it down, just let me know. And last, here's some of the, again, we went to City Council, same package as forest management. We asked for $500,000 for new efforts within the right-of-way. City Council gave us $50,000. And here's some examples of projects we've done. The slide on the upper left is a section of Washington State Department of Transportation right-of-way where there was 28 giant sequoias that were going to be eliminated. We worked with the department. They transferred ownership to the city. We relocated the sequoias over to the Lake Hills Connector, which is an arterial street within the city on the slide upper right. And then we used volunteers on Arbor Day. That's an Arbor Day shot. And then the last shot there on the bottom right is a picture of what that site looks like right now. Well, in ending, I'd like to thank a couple folks, especially the citizens of Bellevue, the mayor and the council, because we wouldn't be in the position we are right now to do good things for trees within the community without their support. And I'd like to thank American Forest and the Alliance for Community Trees for having us on today. And American Forest has been a valuable partner for the city of Bellevue, and I don't think we'd be as far as we are without their help. And that's it.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Dan. Rose, can you open the lines for questions, please?
Yes, sure will. If you would like to ask a question over the phone lines, again, please press *1. Please unmute your phone and record your name clearly when you are prompted. Again, that is *1 to ask a question over the phone. One moment, please.
Great. And I'll also remind people that you can type your question into the Q&A manager at the top menu along the screen. One of the things that I'm interested to hear about, and this is, I mean, a pretty broad and pretty general question, is just major hurdles. You know, so you've done a lot of planning to figure out what you're going to do. What were some of the things that were either unexpected or expected and were major hurdles that you had to overcome?
I think interdepartmental coordination, getting everybody to see that this effort, you know, is what might be important to the Parks Department and the Natural Resource Division and those folks managing trees may not be at the highest priority within other departments. So that hurdle was overcome by the city manager, you know, declaring the Environmental Stewardship Initiative, one of 4 major initiatives within the city, and having Shadis Handy from his office take the lead to bring the departments together to work cooperatively on this plan.
Great, and perfect that you have all those departments represented on the line then today. Does the operator have any questions in queue?
I do not have any questions at this time.
We did have a couple of people asking how to ask a question through the phone. So again, it's *1, and then the operator will give you instructions. But we'll go back online. It sounds like Bellevue has a lot of tree awareness and an ecological approach to government for communities with less awareness and shrinking municipal budgets. How can local city councils be persuaded to place a priority on trees?
This is Kevin. That's a tough question, but I think that a lot of the things that we've done have been outgrowths of the community. One of the things that's it's really excellent to have is to have just finding a few key individuals in the community that you know that you speak to. If you're a staff person and you find some of these individuals out there that come to you, and getting them to actually talk to the decision makers in the cities, maybe reaching out to the volunteer base and finding these people that work with you. As all of us know that work in municipal government, very often the city leaders will take information from the community or the constituents a whole lot differently than they'll take information from staff. And so if you can get those individuals to come and express some of their passion for what they believe to those city leaders, you can start to gain some traction there. How to build that out in the community, I really think one of the keys is just starting small, but having a bigger vision and building on some of those small successes through small volunteer projects where you can reach out to some people in the community that do have a passion for that.
Okay. One of the recommendations from American Forest was to increase pervious surfaces in the public right-of-way. What's actually being done on public property in Bellevue?
Okay, this is Alyssa Ostergaard. We've been just incorporating what we're calling natural drainage practices, which a lot of communities around the country call low-impact development, and we've done some pilot projects around the city. The official low-impact development section of our storm surface water engineering standards is going to be effective in January, but there are quite a few right-of-way projects, roads projects, where they're installing pervious sidewalks, and pervious pavement sidewalks, rain gardens, and the tree retention is also being done on public property around the city.
Dan also mentioned earlier the Environmental Stewardship Initiative, and one of the subheadings under that was green building. The city made a commitment to the Environmental Stewardship Initiative to endeavor with all city capital improvement projects where we're building new facilities such as community centers or maintenance facilities to attempt to meet a LEED standard with those new facilities. And so that's also another, doing that would require careful site design and management of that stormwater system so that it tries to meet the highest standards.
And I think with Silvacell being accepted as a official natural drainage practice, best management practice, in the central business district where there's approximately 400 acres and impervious surface is at 91%, there's a lot of redevelopment, and so the sidewalks are being torn out. And it's our hope to start to prescribe Silvacell and have pervious concrete and or continuous planter strips versus trees on center within grates to improve the stormwater detention capacity in these highly urban areas of the city.
Okay. I find the lack of clear and honest presentation of the cost-benefit trade-offs for homeowners and other landowners is the biggest objection to planting more trees, or at least planting enough trees of the right type of tree or a bigger tree in the right place. How have you balanced the impact on hardscape and underground utilities versus more trees?
I'm not sure that we have done that adequately as far as reaching out and communicating that. We have, more often than not, trees get a bad rap for the impacts that they have on infrastructure, and really our job is to reach out with information to give people options that they can use to make informed decisions. We know that large trees over time provide more benefit, and so things that we work with them on is clustering of utilities, both underground and overhead, so that there's more usable space for large trees. So during the development process, we work with them to make smart choices about the siting of different utilities when we have that opportunity. And when there are challenges, then we also try and provide them with more resources on what alternatives they might have. Maybe it's a smaller tree for a smaller space, but it's still a tree that can fill up that space and still provide some of the benefits.
Is there one lead department that takes the lead for the city? Did you say that the city administrator's office took the lead through the environmental stewardship program? Is this department still the lead?
Yes. the city manager's office is the lead through the environmental stewardship program and initiative, and then Shada Sahandi's the lead of what we call there's a core team and then there's a leadership team that both work together, and the core team consists of members of all the different departments, and Shada is the lead.
Do you have general guides to help the public accept pervious paving in new areas? And also thanks for the planting day and after day pictures to help us understand what the areas look like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as part of our update to the surface water engineering standards this year, we do have drawings for constructing pervious pavement and pretty detailed guidelines in the engineering standards. It's Chapter D6, which will probably be up on our website next week, and then it'll go into effect on January 1st. So people should be able to use those guidelines to build pervious pavement and other natural drainage practices.
How do you overcome the high costs of Silva-cell installation to make use effective and convince city engineers?
Well, we haven't jumped that hurdle yet. I'm sure we'll have a good strategy when that point in time comes, but I think the work that we just showed you, the value and benefits that trees provide over time, the stormwater benefits, the air pollution benefits, the heating, cooling benefits, all of those add up and demonstrate that trees, are a worthwhile investment. And so we're going to have to use that data, that material, combined with other material that our Value Utilities Department has to make a case for using Silva-cell as a stormwater detention best management practice.
Have you thought of the possibility of reducing stormwater utility billing for private property dependent on the canopy coverage of a lot?
I believe the W Utilities has like a three-tiered structure, and then based upon that, so there's three different rates depending upon the amount of impervious surface ratio to pervious surface ratio on your lot. So lots that have more pervious surface and most likely more trees have a lesser rate than those that don't.
Okay. Surveys of residents reveal that residents still rank beauty as the #1 value of trees. Given the city's focus on the ecological services of its trees, how do you reconcile beauty and ecosystem service values?
Well, I think we all know trees provide, social, environmental, and economic benefits, and we don't really try and reconcile that difference. If people think trees are beautiful and they want to keep them for that reason, then that's well and good, and we build on that strength to just sort of bolster that belief that they are beautiful and they provide these benefits to the community. Some people, that might be all that they care about, and then our job is to help them to understand what the other benefits are. But we certainly aren't trying to change their minds at all if they do like them already.
Yeah, beauty's a great asset of trees, but in budget discussions, beauty doesn't get as far as dollars and cents.
Okay. Do you require LEED projects to design around existing trees? If trees are removed, what's required from the developer to compensate for the loss, if anything?
On development projects, we actually don't have any requirement for a LEED certification, and I'm not completely versed in the scoring of the LEED scoring, but I think they would get some points for preservation of native or existing vegetation, so that's really a driver for them in the development process. Yeah, we do have landscape development standards in our land use code and tree preservation requirements in that same section. So essentially we're looking for landscaping that serves as a buffer around the perimeter, as well as landscaping requirements in parking lots to help buffer the impacts of the parking, really from a contextual standpoint and how the urbanization effect of those parking lots look. But then we also get the added benefit of having that canopy coverage in the parking lot for shading and for water retention.
Do you identify at all with the issue that moving away from traditional mowing to allow for natural forest regeneration, reduces mowing costs and staff machine maintenance and fuel?
Yeah, we do relate to that, and that's one of the things about the Pacific Northwest, though, is that we do have a fairly healthy tree canopy, and many of our park sites, like I say, have 69% tree canopy. So that other 31%, which is open areas for play, it could be turf, it could be an athletic field or whatever, those are also highly valuable. So there's a fine line between having too many trees within a developed park and then people complaining that they feel too closed in, they can't see, they're claustrophobic, and having turf. So I understand where they're coming from. However, of 2,600 acres within the park system, 1,900 are pretty much natural area and open space. So I think we have pretty good balance when it comes to trees.
Does the city have any standards on minimum and average tree spacing, on underplanting, and do these standards vary by tree types?
We have a document called the Critical Areas Handbook that actually lays out planting templates for different critical area types with sun versus shade because we actually have quite a bit of slopes in the city, and aspect has a big driver on plant community survival. And so that Critical Areas Handbook that's available through our Development Services Department actually does have recommended spacings for ground cover, shrubs, and trees with recommended starting sizes so that we have hopefully the highest likelihood of success for restoration of native areas.
Okay. What does the Washington Department of Transportation think of the stormwater rain garden? Have you had any problems with its overflow? And is it part of the 100-year flood type spillway, or is there a 100-year flood type spillway?
I'm not sure I really understand that question. Let's see. We haven't used anything from Washington Department of Transportation as far as developing our rain garden standards. We've sized them kind of based on more of a flow duration standard than a storm event standard, and it's about it's kind of difficult to explain, so I won't even try, but we do require that people do not have an overflow that is not directed to, another structure or somewhere where it's going to cause flooding or erosion. And our downstream conveyance needs to be able to convey the 100-year storm if it's, a very big project. So this is such a new technology in Bellevue. I wouldn't say we've seen any catastrophic failures, but we don't have a lot of them installed yet at this point. The research going on in Western Washington by Washington State University shows that these are very effective at managing stormwater in this area and generally more effective than the modeling even predicts. So we are anticipating that they're going to be very successful. But we'll see more in the future as more of them are built.
Okay. And just a question on links. Can you all send me the link for the Bellevue reports /manual and then the Critical Areas Handbook, or can you provide me those documents and I can link them up with this session as well?
Do you want us to email you directly, Jared?
Sure, yeah, and then I'll put it up on the page for this for this session.
Yes, we can. Okay.
Perfect. And for participants, I'll also put up the link where that Partners in Community Forestry session was as well. I let the session go a little long because there were so many questions. This has been great. Just a last nod, are there any questions in queue with the operator?
I do have one question.
Okay, we'll make that the last question.
All right. Frank Rogers, your line is open. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Where will the webinar be archived?
It'll be on the Alliance for Community Trees website, and I'll send a link to participants right after this call.
Thank you.
That was easy. Okay. Well, with that, we'll wrap it up. It's been a great session with had tons of questions, and I really appreciate the presenters and the attendees all sticking around for a few extra minutes to address those. So I'm going to put up on the screen now a link for feedback on this session. And I guess I should have said with the last question that anyone who completes this survey for us, we will send you the link for where the session is. But this really helps us to improve the sessions. And we'll have the recorded session, the presentations, and a resource list with all of the items that we mentioned available within about a week after this session, and we'll email you then. So the next webcast session will be coming up, as always, the third Thursday of the month in January, which will be January 21st. And with that, I want to thank our presenters, Cheryl, Dan, Kevin, and Alyssa, all of our participants, and our sponsors, the Home Depot Foundation and the USDA Forest Service. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Drew.
Thanks very much.
Thank you for participating in today's conference. You may disconnect at this time.
Hey, you're beeping. I turn the phone over to you.